good to see you. It's Verity here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm using a technique that I've seen Jenny, another creative team member for WOW, using in a similar way. She used embossing paste and a variety of different sparkles and embossing glitters to create some really fun backgrounds. And I wanted to use a similar process of using sparkles but with some embellishment mousse to create pearlized textured backgrounds. So I'm starting off just showing you I'm using a variety of different stencils to create this technique, and I'm using some pearlescent embellishment mousse and sort of quite pastel colours. And then I've got three selections of sparkles that I'm using. One that's more of a fine sparkle, and then two of them that are more chunky, and one has a bit more of a colour to it than the other two. To start off with, I'm adhering the stencil to my card panel, and this is WOW embossing powder white card, which is really a beautiful bright white. And then I'm adding my embellishment mousse to my glass media mat and just mixing it around to soften it up. And then the first sparkle I'm using is Bridal. So this is quite a fine glitter. It's quite sort of got whites and silvers in there, and it's a really beautiful iridescent kind of glitter. And I'm mixing this with some aquamarine embellishment mousse. Now you can add as much or as little glitter as you want. Bear in mind it's going to make the mousse quite textured and gritty, so it feels a bit like you're kind of applying sand over the stencil, but when it dries you get these lovely little speckles of glitter just shining in the light when you move your background around. So as you can see, I've just sped it up a little bit and I'm just applying this through my stencil in an area that I think looks nice. So you can apply it in any way you want. The stencil I'm using is the Wavy Grid stencil by New. And once I've applied all the mousse, I'm just cleaning my tools with a baby wipe because this will dry quite hard on your spatulas. And then I will also wash my stencil straight away. But as you can see, it's quite difficult to show in the camera the sparkle that you get from this, but in real life it is really lovely. So for the second background, I'm now using the Lilac Lavender mousse, and again just applying this onto my glass mat. It's a great surface to work for when you're using a bit of mixed media. And the second sparkles I'm using is Prom Queen. It's Prom Queen, and this has a mixture of fine glitter. It's got like a red colour and chunky glitter. Now it's really useful to use something just to mix your sparkles up when you open it, just to get a good even consistency of the different types of sparkles that's in there. And again, I'm just using my palette spatula just to mix the sparkles in. This chevron stencil, what I'm doing now is I'm just applying the sparkled embellishment mousse over a section of the stencil. So I'm sort of creating a stripe up the actual stencil, getting a really good coverage, and then again just removing it. Because this embellishment mousse with the sparkles is a bit more thicker and texturized, you're less likely to get seepage of it underneath the stencil. So if I haven't used a repositional adhesive tacky spray on the back of my stencil, I've just used washi tape to keep it in place, and as you can see I'm not getting seepage underneath. You can really see that this one's got much more chunkier bits of glitter in it, and you can really catch that in the light. So for my final background panel, I'm using some mother of pearl embellishment mousse, and mine's dried up quite a bit, but you can easily revive it by decanting some of it out onto your media mat or your glass mat, and then just adding some water to the mixture. You can either directly add this or spray it like I have done, and you just keep adding spraying a bit more water each time until you're getting it into a much more softer consistency. And it takes a little bit of work, but it does come back to a nice mousse consistency again. For the last sparkles, I'm using the Celebration mix, and this has got quite chunky glitter or silver glitter, and then some gold glitter in there as well, some finer gold glitter. And this, again, those chunky bits really do shine through. For the stencil on this card, I'm using the Spring Garden stencil by New, and I've covered the whole background with the sparkled embellishment mousse this time. So whereas the other ones I either added it to an area I liked, or I kind of added it to a mask sort of area, I have covered the whole of this background. And in the end I was thinking with this colour of mousse and the colour of sparkles that this would make quite a nice congratulations card. And this one I think is my favourite. It has the best sparkle and I think it's just a gorgeous colour to use as well. So just showing you the side by side, the three backgrounds. So I've got that finer one on the left and the other two are more of a chunkier glitter. So just to show you how the rest of the card came together, for the first card I'm using the Leaf Canopy stamp set by Alt New with some vellum, and I'm using one of my favourite metallics from WOW, the metallic platinum. And I'm just using this to heat emboss some of the outline leaves and also some of the more filled in leaf stamp sets as well. Now with vellum you can get a bit of static on there, and so WOW do a lot to remove the static from their embossing powders. That's why it's really important to keep your powders within their pots. With vellum it gets a lot of static and my fingers were going all over this vellum, so I used an anti-static pouch just to reduce the moisture from my fingers transferring over to the vellum. To heat set this, of course, I use my lovely WOW embossing powder gun, and it has two heat settings. Now I just used the lower heat setting, setting 1, the slower one, because I was using vellum. The embossing powder heats up quite quickly on there, and I just wanted to use my lower heat setting because I didn't want to scorch my actual vellum paper. So it's fantastic that you've got these two heat settings on your gun, which is great. Because I was using vellum and it's see-through, to reduce the amount of adhesive that would show through, I decided to adhere my vellum embossed stamps onto some sticky adhesive sheets. This is a really great way of reducing the amount of adhesive seeing through your vellum, because it gives a consistent layer of adhesive all over. You can't actually see it peeping through. And then I just use my scissors to fussy cut these out really quickly. I found that I did faff a lot when it came to creating this card, and you'll see that the finished photo is different to how I leave the card in the actual video. I decided to add a few more stamp leaves. So I added a piece of fun foam to the back of my card panel just to give it a little bit of raised dimension off the actual card, and I couldn't quite figure out which way I wanted my panel to be orientated with regards to the direction of my stenciled background, and in the end I decided for it to come sort of coming down into the bottom right corner. For the actual sentiment, I heat embossed the sentiment from the Leaf Canopy stamp set, and I stamped a special note of thanks to you, and I just stamped this in two separate parts. Didn't do any stamp surgery, I just ensured that I only added ink to the area of the stamp I wanted to stamp first, and then I just did the second as well because I wanted it in two lines. Again, I used my metallic platinum embossing powder, so it just tied in with the leaves, and then I trimmed these down into little sentiment strips. As you can see, it's really easy just to peel the release paper off the vellum embossed leaves, and then this can allow you to adhere it down quite well to a textured surface as well. And as I say, you're not going to see the adhesive seeping through. With stick it adhesive, once you've placed it, it's really important to sort of burnish it down because that will allow it to really adhere. Until you do that, you can reposition your pieces easily, but it's really important that you do burnish it down to adhere it well to a textured surface. So I foam mounted these sentiments onto my card and used my T-ruler to keep them straight. The stencil I used was a grid stencil and it's got wavy lines, so it did really put me off thinking, had I got it straight, hadn't I? But I had to keep telling myself it's a wavy grid. And then I use some sequins from Trinity Stamps. These are the Soapy Bubble sequins, and just to position this around the card. As I say, in the photos later on, you see I added a few of the blocked bold leaves to the actual remainder of the card. To make this second card with the pink or the lilac lavender sparkled background, I just added a fine frames circle die cut to the front, and once I die cut this out, I wanted to emboss the die cut and add several layers of embossing. The embossing powder I chose to go with the lovely pink was the rose gold embossing powder from WOW. It is a gorgeous rose gold, and it's probably one of the first metallics I bought from WOW after a gold and a silver, and it is stunning. So I just smushed this down into my embossing pad. Now I have kind of two WOW embossing pads, one that I use for messy embossing and one I use for general nice embossing. So I smushed this down into my messy embossing pad and then covered this with some embossing powder and used my heat gun to heat set it. And I repeated this step several times to get quite a few layers of the embossing powder onto the actual die cut sentiment. Once it was fully embossed and cooled down, I then added some foam pads to the back so I could foam mount it for dimension onto the front. And I added a die cut sentiment. This is the Sugar Script Hello from Birch Press Designs. I just used one layer and adhered that with some multi-medium matte. Again, I added some more sequins to this card. Again, these are sequins from Trinity Stamps. This is the Soapy Bubbles sequin set, and I do think they are lovely sequins with different sizes. For the last card, and the card I love the most, I added a die cut sentiment. This die is from Heffy Doodle, it's the Congrats die, and I layered the die cut up with several layers of card, and then like the fine frame circle die on the previous card, I heat embossed the sentiment as well and created several layers of heat embossing for a really lovely smooth look and a lovely dimensional look to it as well. And I thought this rich pale gold embossing powder from WOW really tied in with that lovely mother of pearl and also the Celebration Sparkle set. Once this was heat embossed, I just used some multi-medium matte to adhere it to the front of the card. Again, this is textured the front of this card, so it's really important that you get a good adhesive that's going to adhere well. And then lastly, I added a few sequins. These are small little sequins from Tonic. They are the rose gold section. I didn't film this bit because it's quite simple. I just adhered them all over the background with some multi-medium matte. So I hope you enjoyed today's card and showed you how you can add some glitter to your embellishment mousse using WOW sparkles just to take them up a notch. And they really do shine in the light. It's hard to capture that on video. I have to admit, my favourite card is the Congrats card. If you enjoyed today's video, you may also love this card where I created abstract backgrounds with Tonic Nouveau mousse. If you're not a subscriber already, I'd love it if you could subscribe to my channel, and why not hit that bell icon so you can be notified when my next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!